Welcome to the Numbers Game. I'm Cynthia Frelund, and this is the Week 10 TNF Primer, a preview of Bengals at Ravens through the lens of contextualized data, along with a few fun extra facts and stats to know. Make sure you check out our episode with Michael Irvin breaking down many of the trades that went through this week. He gives you some great intel, and it's well worth 20 minutes of your time. As always, it means so much to me that you're choosing to spend some of your time and energy with me, so let's get into it and make this one the best one we've done so far. In week 9, my model went 11-4 straight up, 6-9 against the spread, and 8-7 on totals, bringing my season to 66.7 straight up, 51.8 against the spread, and 52.2 on totals. I'm not going to lie, this is not the best I've ever felt, so let's get right into this game because, as I'm sure you can hear in my voice, I need my illness to be cured, and maybe talking about a little football will do that. This TNF game features two teams who have already played each other, but the Ravens are 6-point home favorites this time, and let's break it down by phase and matchup because that has been good the past 2 weeks. Starting with the offensive lines and how they relate to the quarterbacks in this game. Cincinnati's OL has allowed the 6th lowest pressure rate this season. Joe Burrow has thrown a sub 2.5 second pass on about 55% of attempts, so quick passes at the 3rd highest rate. He's completed nearly 75% of those. He has the 2nd most yards on them, 1,107, the most touchdowns at 10, and 3 interceptions. In week 5, when these teams matched up the first time, he earned 4 of his 5 touchdowns on these quick passes, along with 1 interception. One area that could be an advantage for Burrow is passes targeting the seams, which he's done at the 3rd highest rate and has completed over 75% of them. He also has 9 touchdowns and earned the 6th most expected points added on them. That's pretty darn good. The Ravens defense has allowed the 2nd most yards per attempt at 8.6 and has given up the 2nd most EPA on such passes. The Ravens offensive line is still not firing at all cylinders. They've allowed the 14th highest pressure rate since week 5, and Ronnie Stanley specifically has allowed 21 pressures over that time versus just 6 total pressures in his first 4 games. I bring up Stanley because Trey Hendrickson is who he likely will face in this one. And Hendrickson has generated 46 pressures, which is the 3rd most in the league, and 23 of those have been quick pressures. One area that could be an advantage for Jackson is, of course, scrambling, which he's done at the 4th highest rate in the league, about 20%. And he's thrown a league-high 5 touchdowns off of scrambles. The Bengals defense has allowed the 2nd highest passer rating to scrambling quarterbacks at 103.2, and they face scrambles at the 9th highest rate. Moving on to the passing game. Bengals wideout Jamar Chase has aligned in the slot, off the ball, and gone in motion at the highest rates of his career this season. He leads the NFL with 242 receiving yards over expected and 144 yards after the catch over expected. In week 5, that first matchup, he went in motion on 14% of plays and was targeted on a season-high 63% of his routes in motion, earning 109 receiving yards. That is his most receiving yards of such type in a game over the past 2 seasons. No tight end has lined up out wide more than Mike Gesicki this season, who's done it at a 23% rate. As of right now, T. Higgins is a question mark. In games without Higgins, Gesicki has a 33% target rate, up from about 22% when Higgins plays. And he's been exceptional since entering the league in 2018 on vertical routes, so go, post, corner, and wheel. He had 2 touchdowns off of them last week. As for the Ravens pass catchers, BC alum Zay Flowers has generated 25.7 receiving EPA on targets in the seams that are traveling over 10 air yards. That's the 3rd most by any player through the first 9 weeks of a season since 2018. The Bengals defense has been susceptible to those passes, ranking no better than 5th worst in completions allowed, touchdowns allowed, and yards allowed on such passes. The run game is where we find our biggest imbalance. So starting on Cincinnati's side of things, about 46% of their rushing attempts have been from the shotgun. That's the 10th highest rate in the league. They also have a 0.1 rushing yards over expected per carry from the shotgun, 7th fewest in the league. And Baltimore, well, this is another area where they're showing that number 1 rushing defense. Negative 1.1 rushing yards over expected per carry against shotgun runs this season. That is another metric. They're just fewest in the NFL. This is the number 1 run defense for a good reason. On the other side, Derrick Henry leads the league in both rushing yards before contact with 442 and rushing yards after contact with 607. And Lamar Jackson leads all quarterbacks in each of the following designed quarterback run metrics. Ready? 48 carries, 257 yards, and 14 first downs on designed quarterback runs. Defense could be the area that we see the biggest difference between this week 10 matchup versus the week 5 matchup. So let's do one defensive note for each. The Bengals have used a six-man front on 15% of plays this season. That's the third highest rate in the NFL. They use all six to rush at about 10% of the time. That's the third most. They drop a defender from the line of scrimmage on about 30% of plays, which ranks 12th. Coach Lou is also doing interesting things with his safety alignment as they've averaged the fifth fewest yards from the line of scrimmage this season. What is my point here? Well, Lou Anarumo is disguising fronts and coverages at a high rate, trying to create and manufacture some extra defense for his team. On the Ravens side of the ball, something really interesting about Kyle Hamilton. He's the only defender to play over 5% of their snaps at edge, 30% at linebacker, 25% as a slot corner, and 25% as a safety this season. So he is truly a Swiss Army knife. Also, safety is still his best result, allowing just 2.6 yards per target, which is the fifth fewest in the NFL. Do things change now that they have brought in Dean Pease to consult and help Zach Orr? I don't know. I'm guessing you'll probably hear Roquan Smith and Kyle Hamilton's name a little bit more in the broadcast. Bottom line in my overall simulations, Ravens win 31-23. Some TNF menu options for you this week, starting with the chalky or bland projections. Remember, these happen in 55% of my overall simulations. Number 1, Mike Gesicki to earn more than 43.5 receiving yards. I told you about how good he's been on vertical routes since entering the league in 2018, but here is the stat sheet just so you can, tell all your friends. He leads all tight ends in targets, 131 on such passes, so the vertical routes. Ranks top 4 in receptions, he has 55 of them. Yards, 1,090, he ranks 4th there. And he has 17 touchdowns, which is tied for 2nd. And by the way, the Ravens have been giving up a ton of passing yards, but also yak. Number 2, Joe Burrow to throw at least 2 touchdown passes. He's thrown touchdown passes to running back Chase Brown in 2 games now, and he's had at least 2 passing touchdowns in 6 total games this season. And he also had 5 total touchdowns in week 5 against these Ravens. 2 touchdowns, I like that one a lot. And last but not least, Derrick Henry touchdown. I know, huge shocker here. But remember, it's all about pairing these bland ones with the spicy ones to create the menu. And Derrick Henry has forced 60 missed tackles, the second most in the NFL, which I wanted to make sure and mention. On to our spicies. Remember, these are events that happen in at least 48% of overall simulations, but have enough variance, meaning they're boom or bust enough, to make our recipe pop, aka the risk be worth it. Usually I say to pair 2 bland and 1 spicy, but of course, pair these how you want for the spice level you are comfortable with. Number 1, Chase Brown to catch more than 3.5 passes. With no Zach Moss and facing this run defense, short and quick passes are a key to the Bengals' success. Number 2, Jamar Chase to catch more than 6.5 passes. One more fun fact about Chase to support this, he's caught all 12 of his targets with a linebacker as the nearest defender in coverage this season for 217 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's the most, by the way. And the Ravens linebackers have allowed the 4th most yards per target in coverage. Number 3, Zay Flowers to have more than 59.5 receiving yards. That number is low. I thought I was going to have an under here because the Bengals have been good at not missing tackles and Deontay Johnson will come into play at some point, but I thought the line would be somewhere in the 70s, closer to 80, so 59.5, yeah, that number's too low. I'll see you back here for our full Week 10 episode very soon. I'm gearing up for the newsletter, so remember to join the list. The sign-up will be on my socials again this week. And the last thing for now, projections, scores, and more will be ready for you to use as you wish on Wednesday. Go back and watch the episode with Irv talking about the trade deadline. If you haven't already seen it, it is a good one. And as always, thank you for hanging out. And if you like the show, please pass it along so we can continue to grow.